How we doing, Coach? You're joining us from Nashville. How we doing today?
Great, Corey. Great to be here with you. I appreciate the invite to be on your podcast here. You do a lot of great stuff there. I love the stuff you do with veterans as well too. This is awesome.
Awesome. Before we jump into things, can you tell everybody why you're in Nashville?
I'm in Nashville for the NHL draft. I had one client that was drafted really high, one of the top goaltenders to get drafted in the National Hockey League draft, Carson Bjarnason. I had a few other clients that were supposed to get drafted, yet they didn't get drafted, and that just happens sometimes.
Cool. Well, do you mind giving everybody a brief introduction of yourself and
Yeah,
maybe your hockey story?
sure. My name is Pete Fry. I'm known now as the goalie mindset guy, and I work specifically on the mindset for goaltenders. I am branching out beyond that, but mainly goaltenders. And the reason I do what I do is I was a goalie myself. I played in the Western Hockey League for 5 years, and I was drafted by the New Jersey Devils. And when I was drafted, my first thought was, I don't have a chance. Yeah, I never worked on the mental part of the game. And I feel like I missed out on so much because of that, because of the confidence, which I help goalies now create their own confidence because of the lack of vision that I had. I help goalies get a clear picture of their goalie career, where they want to take it, and help them go a lot further than where they would go without the mental tools.
Did you play hockey growing up? What's your
Oh
playing
yeah.
history like?
Yep. So playing history, like I was born in Toronto, Ontario, in actually York, Ontario. So that's what it says on my birth certificate. And at about 7 or 8 years old, my parents put me in hockey. I wanted to be a goalie. I would watch Toronto Maple Leafs and Montreal Canadiens. In Canada, we had Hockey Night in Canada where everyone watched it every Saturday, no matter what. And Montreal had this goaltender named Ken Dryden, who I really looked up to. So because of that, I wanted to be a goaltender. And also the fact that I couldn't skate very well, too. That was probably one of the reasons I became a goaltender. And I just loved it. And back then, you could be a full time goalie right away at 7 years old. Nowadays, you might switch positions a little bit until you get to a certain age. So I did that. I loved it. My first year I played, I remember my goals against average was 0.88, like zero, not a one or a two, but 0.88. And I've never reached that since.
That's
That
pretty
was
good.
that was a pretty
That's my
yeah.
goal per game average, so we're right there
Okay.
together.
There we go. Well, I think back then you could literally at 7 or 8 years old. Back then, I could probably just lie down on the ground and no one could put the puck above me. That's probably how I saved most of the pucks back then. Then when I was 10 or 11 years old, we moved to Victoria, British Columbia. I remember having a culture shock. The Victoria's out west. It's for people in the U.S. Victoria is an island that is near Vancouver and right across from Seattle. So it's the Pacific Northwest, and there's lots of things to do besides hockey there. So I remember having a culture shock because not everyone played hockey in Victoria, whereas in Toronto, everyone played. And so guys were playing lacrosse, they were going skiing, they were doing all this stuff, and I continued up with the hockey, and then around 14 or 15, I started to get scouted into the Western Hockey League. And 15, I got brought up to my first game in the Western Hockey League. And it's funny because I saw at the NHL draft, one of my teammates, and his name was Cam Neely. And Cam ended up having like a really, really good hockey career. He's now the president of the Boston Bruins. And so when I got called to Portland back that time as a 15-year-old, the general manager said, "Don't worry, you're not going to play," because most of the players are 18, 19, 20. I was only 15. Said, "You're just going to sit on the bench. We're just going to work you in so you get experience. We'll bring you up for 3 games. We'll send you back to minor hockey." Well, the very first game we play, it's against Medicine Hat Tigers, and our other goalie, Bruno Campetti, who I saw him at the draft too. Bruno is now a scout. He's right up there with the Vegas Golden Knights. He just won a Stanley Cup. And Bruno was the other goalie on our team. And about a minute into the game, a player on Medicine Hat runs over Bruno, and he's down on the ice and he's not moving. And I'm freaking out on the bench. The coach, who was very intimidating, lots of intimidating coaches back then, looks over and says, like, "Peter, get ready. You're going to go in." And I'm literally shaking, like shaking on the bench. And I go to pick up my glove. I could barely move to pick up my glove or move to hop over the. Anyways, it was just not a good feeling. I wanted to grab the mic from the PA guy and just say, if anyone in this building has goaltending experience, please come on down to ice level because I do not want to play. Anyway, so when I look back at that, that was the wrong mentality to have. When Bruno got hurt, I should have just stood up, shoulders back, chin up, breathe deeply, and just said, "Hey, this is my opportunity. Let's go out there and do what we can and focus on the controllable." See, the challenge with a goaltender is that they're in a position, and correct me if you can think of anything else that has more uncontrollable than a goaltender. I don't think there is. I think a goaltending position has more uncontrollable than any position on the planet because you can do everything well as a goalie and have a terrible result still. Like you
100%
lose
agree.
5-0. Yeah. Well, one of my clients, Talon Boyko, he's signed with the New York Rangers. Last year in the Western Hockey League, he got one of the only 350-plus save shutouts in the last 20 years in the Western Hockey League. He called me. We talked after the game, and he's like, "Pete, last game we lost 5-0. The GM called me out in front of the team, and I think I played better that game than I did this game where I got this 50-plus save shutout." Just because maybe the ice wasn't as good, players were running into him, guys are screening him last minute, pushing him, and things like that. And who's Corey? Who's your favorite? Who's your favorite artist? Like singer or group? Who do you really like?
That's good. That's a great question. I like
One comes to mind.
genres. I like genres. So like right now
Okay,
it's like the New York drill rap scene is like a
okay,
genre of rap, a
okay. So
subgenre.
genre. Okay, so let's say someone's on stage rapping. Who's a great rapper?
We'll go with Pop Smoke.
Okay, so let's say Pop Smoke is upstage, is on stage, and he's rapping, right? And he's rapping, he's performing well, and he's got the mic up there, and his voice goes well into the mic. And so what you see is the result, and it's really good, right? You really like him. He's doing a great job. But imagine it's Pop Smoke, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Imagine if Pop Smoke is on stage and he's performing well. He's saying words exactly as he needs to say them at the right time, the right tonality, the right level. And then while he's doing that, someone is pushing his mic away from his face. Someone's pouring water down his mic. Someone's pushing him. They're moving the stage so he can't stand up. Even though he's performing well, what will the result be? It won't be as good, will it?
No.
That's what it's like to be a goalie. You can perform, you can do everything well and not get the result. So the key thing that a lot of goalies have a challenge to overcome, which they have to overcome failure because they're going to fail a lot. Do you have a favorite goalie? Do you have a favorite goalie?
Growing up in the '90s, I really liked Curtis Joseph, and Ole Kolzig, and I got started playing just around the time Mighty Ducks came out and that explosion
Okay.
in the '90s. I'm an '88 birth year,
Okay.
so growing up, like it was hard not to watch Ed Belfour and Dominic Hasek, and then go out in the driveway and just like laying and flail around and do those moves and be successful. And so I like a lot of those older goalies. Now that
Yeah.
it's gotten to be so much of like a development system, like it's hard for me to get invested in liking guys, especially as like a St. Louis Blues fan or like a fan of a team, because you might like a goalie for another team that's their opponent in their rival division, or you might have to play against somebody. I went to the Blues Stars game preseason. They had it at our community arena, and I got to see who's the Stars goalie. The name's blanking on me, but I got to see like a
Oh, yeah,
starting,
I know who you mean. Yeah.
yeah, a
Jake
starting
Ottinger.
goal.
Jake Ottinger.
Yes, Ottinger, and it's like that wasn't somebody that I would never would have watched the Stars, and then I watched that game, and since then I've like seen his name in the media. I've seen his clips. Like we don't get a lot of Dallas Stars coverage here where I'm at, but like the time it was Ottinger, and it was like, oh, I got to see him, and he is as good in person, and that's kind of how I fall into like watching goaltending nowadays. Like I don't know
Yeah.
any of the prospects. I don't, for the NHL draft, I kind of don't pay much attention to the names and who they got, with the understanding that a lot of these guys still have like time to play in the Q or the O or college, or you know, there's an opportunity for them to develop. I did have a chance to skate last summer with Jake Barsawetsky. He was Canisius College's goalie, and I think he just transferred to Michigan. And that's an thing I don't get a skate with a lot of like NHL prospects, and you read about them on the internet or you get to see articles, and then you step on the ice and there's like a 25-year age gap between me and him, but it's still like, oh, okay, I can kind of see. You're like, I don't have much exposure to the high end talent like that, so when I'm out there, I'm like kind of looking at them funny, for the first couple of days because we don't have a lot of uh, draft picks and NCAA Division One goaltenders around here, and so there's like a little bit of mysticism around them that I think a lot of goalies have nowadays. Um,
Yeah. Yep.
Especially with
Yeah.
the draft, like it's so deep. Like I think to be successful in hockey now, you need to have a couple goalies. And so like it just has increased the number of guys. It used to be like one goalie per team, maybe, or one goalie per division that stood out that everybody was watching. But now it's like every team has two good goalies and they're fighting for spots. And it's like, oh, he might be good, but he might not get a chance to play. And so for a whole year, there's like
Yeah.
anxiety or tension. I wouldn't call it anxiety. There's tension around. That stuff is exciting. So that's why it's cool to see that you had somebody in the draft and you were down and you're involved in the draft because it's exciting. What's kind of give everybody like your first clinic? Like, what was your first time that you decided to step on the ice and like teach a goalie? What was that like?
And just to be clear, now I actually I do go on the ice again now with my seminars, like at the end of the day. But normally, all my coaching is over the phone or it's on Zoom. Right? Most of my coaching now. Yet I did like I back in the day. I used to run the goalie program at what was called the Okanagan Hockey School, which was a big hockey school back in the day in the 90s, in the early 90s, and the Okanagan Hockey School was like an 8 week, divided by a week at a time, where they would bring in. You may not have heard of these names at the time, but they would bring in like Grant Fuhrer, Andy Moog for a week, and Ron Tugnut, and all those guys. So I started coaching then, and eventually ran that program for goaltenders. And then from there, I was still playing. So, for example, I played in Sweden. And when I came back from there, I started a hockey school with a friend of mine, Darren Jensen, former Philadelphia Flyer. Darren played the very first game. If you ever heard of Pelly Lindbergh, he was a phenomenal goaltender that passed away in a car crash. And Darren played the very first game after Pelly passed away, and played like a bunch of games for the Flyers back in the day. So he and I started a hockey school, and during that hockey school, we brought in three big name pros each week. Like back in the day with Joe Sakic, players and goalies, Joe Sakic, Ron Hextall, Mark Recchi, John Van Beesbrook, Dave Lowry, all these guys. And then with each of the guys, I would, even though we would go on the ice with the goalies, I would also do a seminar, and I would call it the road to the NHL. And I would interview these guys about what they did mentally, what they did physically, what was it. Rod Brendamore came to the. I remember when he was at the hockey school, he's phenomenal. Right? The coach of the Carolina Hurricanes, and a couple stories about Rod. One is during the hockey school, before we would leave the ice when he was on instructing, he would just skate from wall to wall back. We call them wallies, back and forth every time. Like he would just work so hard, which is great. So so that would have been the first time, and I've instructed goalies ever since. I started a center with synthetic ice back in '93, where Robbie Calico was my first kind of student in there to play in the National Hockey League. Robbie's now the goalie coach for the Boston Bruins. He's a phenomenal human being, and he would be a great guy for you to have on your podcast as well. Lots of yeah. And so from there, I just continued to instruct. But as I did, I recognized that the most important part at the end of the day was the mental part. Didn't matter how good someone was technically, if mentally they were off, they weren't confident, or they weren't able to focus on the right things. That made a difference there. And so that's when I started just to specialize. And what happened was, you ever heard of Eli Wilson?
I don't know if I have.
Okay, if
School
you
me.
guys put him, yeah, if you guys put him in, Eli is he was a student of mine. He's one of the best goalie coaches out there right now. He's got great schools, Eli Wilson goalie schools. So he asked me, he's like, Pete, would you like to come in and speak at one of my camps? So I did that. I did a seminar for the goalies in one of the camps. The parents were coming up to me after saying that was phenomenal. So then I thought, okay, I need to do more of this. I need to do more of the mental side because not only is it good for the goalies, but they like it. They like it. And see, when I grew up playing hockey, there were sports psychologists, and they had a lot of good information. The challenge with a lot of the sports psychologists is that when they would talk or when they would go over stuff, guys would be nodding off. They'd be
Hmm.
falling asleep. And one of the goalies I've done a lot of work with, that's with the Canadian Olympic team, a female. She says it perfectly. She says, Pete, the difference between working with you and a sports psychologist is when I'm working with a sports psychologist, it's like I'm reading a big thick textbook. And she said, when I'm working with you, it's like I'm on the ice. Even though we're not on the ice, it's like I'm on the ice. Because I use two main philosophies. One is every word that is said forms a picture in your head. And if you think about that, every word that is said forms a picture in your head. For example, so I say the word car, what image comes to your mind?
A red car,
A red car.
cartoon
Yeah,
looking
yeah, yeah,
cartoon looking car.
yeah. Yet you don't get the image of CAR, right? It's actually a picture. If I say dog, what kind of dog comes to mind?
Doberman Shepherd for some reason.
Love it. Okay, perfect. So every word that's said forms an image in your head. And then the second philosophy that I follow is that you walk into the picture you hold of yourself. And we are responsible for creating the pictures in our head that we want through what we visualize, through the people we hang around with. We got to make sure we're hanging around with people that are talking in a positive way. Because if they're consistently talking in a negative way, putting negative stuff in your head, it doesn't matter. That becomes part of us because we're hearing it all the time, right? So we got to surround ourselves with like-minded people that want to do stuff. So I tell my athletes, I'm like, you don't have to hang around with other driven hockey players. They could just be athletes because their habits are gonna, you're gonna develop the same habit
Do you
when you do
find
that.
that there's like any specific like pre-sport or any type of like sport that's a particular goalie plays before that prepares them well for the type of like mental rehearsal or imagery, or is there any type of like precursor or anything that like just from working with the number of athletes that you have on this, like the guys that pick it up easier than others?
Yeah, the best thing and what I do for guys is pre-game visualization, where I'll take them through a visualization of their game. So that way it's the same sport. It's like Wayne Gretzky said. He said, what did Wayne Gretzky said? He said to prepare for hockey, I'm going to play hockey. I'm not going to cycle. And he said cyclists are not going to play hockey to prepare for the Tour de France, right? So with goaltenders, so what I do is I'll take them through a pregame visualization where they see themselves, getting first star of the game at the end of the game. They see their players pour off the bench to congratulate them, and then we go through. Well, what did they do to get there? Making a glove save, a blocker save, a breakaway save, just continuing to make save after save. And so they see that really clearly, and that follows the philosophy of you walk into the picture you hold of yourself. That way, they start the game very confident. Because I always ask goalies, and it works the same with players. Works the same with anyone in whatever they do. It would work the same in basketball. If a goalie makes 3 or 4 saves, feeling super confident, right? Because confidence comes from the images in our head and how we're moving. Whereas you don't have to make those saves to feel that confident because you can visualize. Right? You can totally visualize, you can imagine, and you can move in a powerful way. Same thing with basketball, same thing with baseball for hitters and things like that. And I've done experiments with baseball players as well. Like one of my clients who played baseball in the summer, right? And it totally turned his batting average around just by now doing this clear visualization before he went up there to hit the ball.
And I think that there was a recent study that was published like 3 or 4 years ago where they looked at the type of training, whether it was they had two groups of athletes, one that just visualized a certain activity and then one that performed it. And I think that the rate of the learning curve, like the bell curve on how long it took them to like progress a certain amount of percentage, was almost identical. It wasn't the same, but it was like 80 the people that
Yeah.
visualized it, 80% were, were able to improve 80% on a physical test, not a mental test, but a physical test, just by
Yes.
envisioning it and doing the reps that they would, same amount of reps in their head. And so, like, there's no reason why you shouldn't use both of them, in my opinion.
You got it 100%. So I call that the 23% rule. There was a study at University of Chicago, Dr. Biastotti, I think, or something, some name like that, where they took three groups of basketball players. And one of the group, they said for the next 30 days, you're not allowed to touch a basketball. You can't go near a basketball court. You're just going to visualize. And then we're going to retest your free throw percentage after the 30 days. So they go through the 30 days. They don't touch a basketball. They don't go near a basketball court, but they visualize getting the baskets in every single day. And on average, they improved 23% just by visualizing. So it's really neat. So I'm speaking to a group of goalies in Vancouver, and there was a goalie coach in the audience. He comes up to me after, and his name was Ron, and he goes, "This is amazing." He goes, because I was talking about how they can apply the 23% rule before practice, even when they're on practice, before they do the drill, after the drill, after a game by running the movie of their successes. Most goalies, if they stop 44, 45 shots, they're focused on the one shot they didn't save. And so they're doing a negative 23% in their head because they're going over that save they didn't make again and again. And so Ron comes up to me and Ron says, I was Carey Price's goalie coach in Tri Cities in the Western Hockey League. And he says this all makes sense now because he said Carey Price after games, whereas most goalies, if they stop 42 or 43, I asked them how they did. They're talking about the one save they didn't make. And so they're actually applying the negative 23% rule. They're getting 23% worse. Whereas Carey Price, we could lose 5-4, and I'd be like, I don't think you played very well. But I would ask him, I go, Carey, how do you think you did? He'd be like, well, I made this great glove save. I made this breakaway save. So no matter what happened, Carey Price, after every game, was applying the positive 22% rule. And so that's something for anyone listening. If you want to get better at goaltending, if it's anything whatsoever, before you do the activity, run the movie of a great performance. Run that movie clearly through the activity. Run the movie of your successes. And to take it to an even higher level, if there was, say, three mistakes you made, let's say a goalie didn't make a save, what you do is you run that movie just as it happened up into the time when you would do something different. Then you would cut the movie, you would put a new movie in there and see yourself having the success.
No,
And
that's great stuff, and you're able to like redo it because it's creative. It's in your head.
yeah.
Like there's
Mm-hmm,
no
mm-hmm.
limits. That's what I like about a lot of this is you're limited in like so much of the physical realm of like reps and practice.
Yeah.
Like saving a one timer going from one post to the middle to the other post back over, like if you play beer league or if you play in like house league, like you might not ever get a chance to practice that three times, and it's going to come up one time. Like, are you confident that you've done it enough in your head or on the ice to know, like, the move and have it committed to muscle memory?
100%.
And
100%.
goalies get it a lot more because it really is like a 50 against one. I mean, you have the 20 players on each side.
Yeah.
You got the guys on the ice, and then you have the refs. And then so it's like, how do you think about that? Sometimes will also dictate to is like, is it all 50 against them or is it like you against all 50? There's also a mindset in that too. Like goalies changed a lot of the pace of the game sometimes. And I can tell
Yeah.
some of the goalies that are confident with this when they start or, are able to like change a tempo. It's like a very ephemeral thing. It's hard to talk about, but certain goalies are able to like, you know, push that envelope of like the pace of the game or, Carey Price is one of those guys or Marc-Andre Fleury, like, you know, at the start of the game, everybody's kind of looking at them of like, how's this going to go? Like those guys are the night that are going to be the one that tells everybody or sets the pace how the night's going to go. And so that's fascinating stuff. And I know there's a lot of new athletes to hockey that I work with, and these are all things that they ask me about. Is like, I
Yeah.
can tell that they're thinking about it because like they'll do a play or we're playing a scrimmage and they'll make a mistake and they'll come back and they'll say, "What should I have done here?" And it's like, "Oh, I can tell you're not ruminating, but I can tell there's like a thought in your head and there's a sequence that's playing out." It's like, do you practice that? Like next time you go on ice, are you like setting up cones in that position and walking your body through that same movement and just like thinking in your head what you would do, and then can you try it in a game and see, oh, I should have done this instead of this? It's like a route tree for football players. Like you can kind of work your way up, but it really does start with being able to like, okay, where was I here? What
Yep.
happened? And I love that tip of like cutting the tape.
Yeah.
Like you were saying, it's easy to visualize when you say car, the shape of a car. I feel like if you tell people that the thing in your head should be like a movie reel, it helps with like your memory of like you're looking at it like a highlight tape or you're looking at it like a reel back.
Yeah.
What are some you talked about goalies and of course that applies to players in other sports, but
100%.
what do you think is like a player? So I currently play minor professional hockey, and one of the things as a coach I get asked a lot is like guys want to score more goals. So like,
Yes.
can you give me maybe a tip for people that you think that what players should be doing if they want to like
Yeah.
score more goals?
100%. 100%. And we are just working on it. And I'll have to send you some copies for your listeners. We're just coming out with the book Hockey Mindset Secrets. So it's a friend of mine who we played with in the Western Hockey. He was drafted by LA and stuff like that. So he wanted to do what we're doing on the players side stuff. And we can collaborate with stuff like that as well. But for players, it works exactly the same. And I work with a few players, not a lot, just to refer like 3 or 4 players. And the one of the things as far as scoring goals, it's the same philosophy. You walk into the picture, you hold it yourself, right? And a lot of times a player will forward process what they're doing. So they have the puck in their end. Let's say they're going to carry the puck up ice. They start off with how do I get out of the blue line or how do I get through the neutral zone? How do I get in the and then what happens by the time they get to the net, they're so far off that they may not even get a shot away. Whereas I believe that you got to start with the end point in mind. So with players, and it's really cool if you go on YouTube and you put in headless hockey player. Okay, now it's not going to be something gory. It's I was doing a little on ice thing quite a few years ago with a player, and what I did was I had him blindfolded, and he had the stick handle through 3 pylons and fire the puck, and there was a net against the net, so it was only like a space of about this much at the top that the puck had to go through, and he was able to do that blindfolded just because the images in his head were so clear. And so for players, I would say it's even more important because there are so many distractions out there as a hockey player. Guys are chirping you, right? Guys, right? That all guys are chirping you. They're putting those other images in your head. They're chopping you. They're sticking you. They're cross checking you. They're pushing you. They're bumping you and stuff like that. So I would start off with just have that clear picture of the black puck hitting the white net and hold that endpoint there, and then back everything up from there. So just see it, see it, see it. You can do a lot of when you're training hockey players. For example, if let's say you got a shooter tutor on the net, and you want to put the puck in the low left corner. Let's say low because it's easy, it's simplest, right? And there's a left-handed shooter. So if you start the player back in the blue line, you say, okay, you're just going to shoot right to that low left corner, and you give him 10 shots, right? It depends on the skill of the player. Some players may get 1 out of 10, 2 out of 10. Some could get more depending on their skill. Yet if you start him right at the net and you actually start his stick in that target, so the stick is kind of pointing right in the target, right in the goal line, and then you reverse it, you put a puck on his stick, and he finishes off. Then as you do that, you slowly back him up. His success from the blue line is going to be double, triple, or quadruple than what it was if he started at the blue line.
Wow.
And the only reason is because those images in his head are a lot clearer now.
No, that makes sense. And I know like with getting guys shooting for like the first time and learning to shoot. Like most of the time when we do a drill and they start adding on complex movements, they do the drill and they're so quick to like just shoot it and fire and get it off their stick. And I'm constantly telling guys like, hey, nobody's on you. Skate it in as close as you can get. Like you shouldn't shoot it from the top of the circles if you're just learning to shoot. Like, can we skate it into the crease and like you were saying, like almost reverse engineer this? Like
Yes.
start at 6 inches with your stick exactly where it needs to be. And then maybe as we pull you and back you up, I know that your stick's going to end up pointing there, and teaching guys how the stick works and aiming points. And, it's, that's a really good tip. I like that. Do
A
you,
lot less obstacles that way. Oh, go
what
ahead.
what are some things you think players should not do to score more goals? Like especially knowing goalies nowadays. Like I'll give you an example. I think that players should do less of like the dusting off of a puck or holding it. Like if you want to score less goals, like if somebody gives you a quick pass, like hold on to it. Like that's a great way to score less goals.
It is. It is. It
Especially
is. Yeah.
nowadays.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that saying that Wayne Gretzky says, what is it? You'll miss 100% of the shots that you don't take. And so the more that someone can shoot, the better. A lot of times players don't shoot because they're not having that confidence. But you can score from anywhere. You saw it. You saw it in the remember Canada, the U.S. That winning goal by Crosby. He wasn't in a great area to shoot the puck. A lot of players wouldn't have shot it, right? And that's just a small. That happens all the time. Players just shoot. Yeah, I would say just shoot the puck as much as you can. If you want to score less goals, do not shoot the puck.
I
Hold
love
it, hold
that.
it, hold it.
I love that. I've scored a couple goals in beer league recently from like on the net mouth baseline, like the goal
Yeah,
line facing in. And I've been working on plays because there's so much of it was so often, like you were saying, like don't shoot it. Well, there's creative ways to think about it. Like I know how goalies play the posts,
yeah,
and I know like on a forecheck and a puck off the boards, like how many goalies practice like a hard puck that goes by them off the boards and then back out to the net mouth, like that quick back and forth. And so like I'll be at a stick and puck and I'll be like on the baseline going, but trying to shoot between my legs or something. Guys, like, what are you doing? You'll never do that. It's like the one time, like, because I want to have confidence that like I get the puck. That might be my only shot as a forechecking F1 on the fourth line. As somebody dumps the puck in hard, it comes off the boards. Like I have to be
yeah,
confident. Like you say, you can score from anywhere on the ice. Like
yeah.
if it's recognizing where I touch the pucks and like the areas that I touch the puck. And as a forechecking forward that's undersized, like I touch the puck a ton on the goal mouth and below. And there's guys that never shoot it, but we've seen recently with Zegras, like the pass from behind, and like guys are starting. Gretzky was famous for having a net behind there, like rethinking
Yeah.
how you think about the game and the spaces. Uh, that's a good segue into this. Should the Michigan move be illegal?
No, I think it should be totally legal. It's legal. It's legal. 100%. Mike Clegg, Michigan. He's from just outside of Vancouver, Port Coquitlam, BC. Right. He's the guy that got the first mission goal. It needs to be legal. I think that should be legal. I think they should get rid of the limitations for the goaltenders, like whatever you call that. They have the lines in there. I think they should let goalies skate to the far end if they want, because they get penalties if they go over center ice. Why not let them? If they are gutsy enough to skate to the far end, what's going to happen if they miss the pot? If they give it up, like it's. I think
Right.
they should just, as far as entertainment goes, just let them do whatever they want to do. Maybe they're free game, something like that. The the other, so when it comes to players and scoring, they have to me they have to have an image in their head all the time of the black puck and the white mesh, no matter where they are, what they're doing. For example, there's a video that I show goalies, and it's when I'm talking to them about focus, and it's from the KHL. You may have seen it, where there's a 2-on-1, and the goalie for one of the teams in Russia, the 2-on-1 just breaks over the blue line. He turns around and he takes a drink of water. Have you seen that video?
Yeah.
The goalie taking a drink of, if you watch it closely, the player on the right side that had the puck could have just simply shot the puck in the net when the goalie turned around. But he did not have that image in his head. He ends up passing it, right? How come it doesn't make sense for a player to pass the puck on a 2-on-1 if the goalie's turned around? He could have just shot it in the net easily, right? So really, that video is a great video to show players for lack of focus and not being focused on the right things, right? And who is it? Michael Phelps, sports psychologist, says that when an athlete is on a hot streak or a slump, they're just as focused. They're just as focused. The difference is they're focused on the wrong things when they're in a slump. That's it. They're focused on the right things when they're performing well.
No, I
And for
totally agreed. And it understanding that that's the battle that like the pros, the guys that are at the tip of the spear and that they're doing this is like that's where this all is. It's like there's this big internal thing going on, and those guys that like that and can handle that, like that's where that next level of hockey is, whether it's juniors, college, pros, especially. Like you have to understand that when you get put in that position, like that turmoil and the tension is going to happen, and you have to have your way of like fighting through it or visualizing or understanding and being in it, you know.
100%, 100%. If and I don't work with players. If I did, and if I had to train some players to just be unbelievable goal scorers, what I would do is I would have them in the offensive zone, and I would get them to take a look at the net from all different areas. Some from standing in the corner. I'd have them look at the net, then I would blindfold them. And I'd say, I want you to skate to the slot and shoot and score blindfolded. Because what that does is now they can be anywhere at all on the ice and they know where the net is. And if you look at the Connor McDavis, the very best player, they see that net. They can be looking back that way, but they know exactly where that net is. And that's a big difference between what people call natural goal scorers and people that are not natural goal scorers, is that they know where that net is all the time.
Yeah. I'm trying to think when you say that mental picture of the puck hitting the net, I actually think of that Mighty Ducks scene where it hits the post and goes out. But that's just because I've watched Mighty Ducks 100 times. I'm able,
Yeah.
I'm able to like think of it, but that's kind of the style. Like for some reason, it's like very antiqued. Like I guess I've watched a lot of hockey movies, and that's like a famous shot to recreate is like a puck hitting the net to
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
symbolize scoring. So like I'm tainted a little bit on that, but I can more easily think of it as like in the third person, like from above myself.
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
it's easier for me to like look like I'm looking down on myself shooting the puck into the net.
Okay.
Like
Yeah, those are
when I
two
close
different
my
types.
eyes, because I think so much of like body, it's hard for me
Yeah,
to just see the puck in the net hitting the net, which is like what you're saying, the focus,
yeah,
and being able to pick those little. When I was growing up, it was so much pick the little things in the net and find a spot and miss small, and so
sure.
I love that. Well, thank you
There we
so
go.
much, Coach, for joining us and chatting with me today. I really enjoyed it, and we'll definitely stay in touch. Can you tell everybody where to find you?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. So PeteFry.net. Think of that, hockey net. So Pete Fry, PETEFRY.net. That's my website. You can go on there. Instagram, it's goalie_mindset. Twitter, I think it's Pete Fry Mindset. And I think the same thing on TikTok, Pete Fry Mindset. Make sure I would recommend my book, Magnetic Mindset Secrets. That's the latest book, which is great for goalies, great for parents, great for hockey players, for everyone. Carson Bjarnason, the goalie that was one of the top goalies in the draft, he's read my book, Goalie Mindset Secrets, 12 times. 12 times. I thought that, to me, that says more about him than it does my book, is that he's just super, super dedicated there. So I would recommend that. There's also Athlete Mindset Secrets. You can find them all on the website. It just takes you to Amazon there. And yeah, reach out. And thanks for having me on, Corey. This is awesome, buddy. Great job.